was a few months after my 2-year relationship ended, and I was back to the familiar quiet of my own place. My fingers automatically gravitated to dating apps, a habit from college that felt decidedly different in my late 20s. The novelty of living alone had worn off quickly, and I found myself craving connection, even if it was just a fleeting distraction from the silence. I was an accountant, and while the money was good, the job was soul-crushingly dull. One evening last December, as the holiday spirit started to take hold, I posted a festive picture on my Snap story. To my surprise, a notification popped up. Chloe Hayes had commented. I'd matched with Chloe on one of the apps a while back, exchanged a few messages, and then, as often happened, the conversation had simply faded. She initiated a chat about getting into the Christmas spirit together. We talked for a bit, and I, eager to escape the house, threw out ideas, ice skating, checking out the village lights. But Chloe had a different suggestion: decorating my Christmas tree. My fake tree was still packed away in the attic. It's kind of a two-person job to get it down, I told her, hoping she'd suggest something easier. To my surprise, she immediately offered to help. Why not? I thought, desperate for any company. We made a plan for her, come over around 9 p.m. It was already around 7:30, so I quickly grabbed my keys, made a frantic dash to the liquor store for a couple of wine bottles, and then rushed back home. Once home, I launched into a cleaning frenzy. My ex used to handle most of the tidying, and it was surprising how quickly dust bunnies multiplied without her. By 9 p.m., I was settled on the couch, pretending to be engrossed in a movie, everything meticulously arranged for a cozy evening. I waited, checking my phone repeatedly, and eventually sent a "let me know when you're on your way" text. I was starting to think she'd flaked until, around 9:30, a message popped up. I'm outside. I opened the door and was instantly struck by her height. I'm 5 feet 10 inches, so for me to be looking up at her, she had to be at least 6 feet tall. And then there was the scent, an overpowering cloud of what smelled like cheap perfume. We went straight to the couch, and she sat so close our legs were touching. This is where my confusion started. She looked a bit older, perhaps a little rougher around the edges than I'd imagined, and underneath that heavy perfume, I detected a faint, unsettling hint of body odor. It was a complete turnoff. Would you like some wine? I asked, trying to shake off my discomfort. Yes, please, she replied. I poured us both glasses of Merlot. You know that feeling when you finally meet someone you've been texting, and they're just not what you pictured. That was Chloe. Something felt off, a lack of certain social cues. I handed her a glass. We clinked them together, and I swear, almost immediately, a huge drop of red wine splashed onto my light blue couch. My heart sank, but I forced a composed smile. It's okay, I said, rushing to the kitchen for a damp paper towel and sponge. I blotted the stain furiously while she apologized profusely. The tension in the room thickened. To break the awkward silence, I suggested we tackle the tree. I headed up to the attic, sliding over the giant box of tree parts. I handed down each piece, one by one, until we got to the largest section, the one I couldn't manage alone on the ladder. She grabbed it with surprising ease. Her height and strength were definitely notable. With all the pieces downstairs, we assembled a tree in the living room, Christmas music playing softly in the background. I poured us more wine, drinking a bit more myself. The alcohol started to loosen me up, making the situation feel a little less strange. Next were the ornaments. I told her mine were all in the crawl space, bins and bins of childhood decorations my parents had given me over the years. I headed down, leaving Chloe in the living room. As I started lugging the first bin up the stairs, a wave of wooziness washed over me. I'm not a heavy drinker and have a low tolerance, but I felt more lightheaded than I thought I should given the amount I consumed. By the time I reached the top of the stairs, Chloe was nowhere in sight. I called her name, assuming she was in the bathroom. I checked each room, then the empty bathroom. My brow furrowed in confusion as I called her name again. I went to message her on Snap, but the message remained unopened. The 2 bedrooms were also empty. She was gone. She just snuck out. The thought stung, even though I hadn't been particularly drawn to her. I collapsed onto the couch, which suddenly felt incredibly comfortable. I vaguely remember checking my phone periodically, hoping she'd open my Snap, and just watching whatever was on TV until my memory faded to black. Then I woke up in darkness. No lights, no TV. I looked around the room, disoriented. I was still on the couch, but I felt weak, my limbs heavy and difficult to move. I fumbled for my phone, finding it right under me. The moment the screen lit up, illuminating the dark room, I saw it, the silhouette of a tall person standing directly in front of me. For some reason, I didn't scream. I just lowered the phone, plunging the room back into darkness. Finally, I managed to croak out Chloe, hoping it was her, still not fully registering what had happened earlier. Whoever was there didn't answer. I slowly raised my phone again and turned on the flashlight. It was Chloe, standing perfectly still, looking down at me. I felt paralyzed, pinned to the couch, whether by sheer terror or the effects of whatever she'd clearly laced my wine with. I didn't know. My limbs felt like lead. All I could manage was another muffled, "Chloe," a few more times. She then turned towards the stairs and, I swear, sprinted down them. I heard a disturbing series of loud stomps, followed by a loud slam, likely the front door. Everything felt wonky, distorted. With each passing minute, my head cleared and movement became easier. I checked Snapchat. Her account was gone, meaning she blocked me. I looked out the front window. No cars, just mine and the neighbors. And then it hit me. I never saw what she arrived in, or if she even arrived in one. I checked my entire home, every room, every drawer. Nothing seemed to be missing at first, until I noticed some peculiar absences. Every last bottle of pills was gone. My vitamins, supplements, my Adderall, and even a bottle of OxyContin I had been prescribed after surgery, but never fully used, which had been in the drawer next to my bed. A bottle of vodka from my mini fridge in my room was also gone. Other than that, nothing seemed stolen. Still, I called the police immediately and reported the robbery. I gave them her Snapchat username and explained I didn't have her number or any other identifying information beyond the name she'd given me. Chloe Hayes. The police knocked on my neighbor's door, despite it being 1 a.m., and with me standing beside them, asked if he'd seen or heard anything unusual. He said no, he'd been asleep. After about 20 minutes, the police left. I made sure all my keys were accounted for, ensuring she couldn't get back in. But other than that, Chloe Hayes had vanished without a trace. Her quirky, wonky behavior from the moment we met now made disturbing sense. I won't call it a theory, because I'm certain that woman was older than she claimed, and likely homeless with a severe drug addiction. The perfume was a desperate attempt to mask her body odor. She laced my wine when I was in the attic, knocking me out long enough for her to scour my entire home for any and all drugs and supplements. The image of her tall silhouette standing over me as I groggily woke up on the couch is seared into my memory. Honestly, after that night, I didn't even bother decorating the tree that year. It was Christmas Eve, 1997. I was 7 years old, and my little sister, Alara, was 4. For us, Christmas Eve was just another evening. We're Jewish, so there were no stockings hung or presents under a tree. Our dad, Dr. Mendel, a dedicated physician, was on call at the hospital as he always was during the Christmas holidays. That meant it was just Alara and me holding down the fort. Our mom was technically home, but to be frank, she was often passed out by dusk in those days, consequence of her battle with alcoholism. At 7, I didn't understand the word alcoholic, only that mom was unreachable once darkness fell. Alara and I were engrossed in a cartoon downstairs when a loud rap echoed from the front door. Being the older sibling, I cautiously approached. Our front door had those wide glass panes, making it easy to see who was on the other side. A man dressed head to toe in a Santa suit and clutching a large sack stood there. He offered a wide, unsettling smile and beckoned me closer. I stayed behind the locked door, a prickle of unease starting to form. Why would Santa come to our house? "Hey kid, it's me, Santa. Let me in. I've got your presents," he boomed. I remember my voice, clear and indignant, cutting through the glass. Santa isn't real, and even if he was, he doesn't give presents to Jewish kids. His jolly demeanor faltered for a second before he recovered. Of course I'm real. I used to only visit Christian homes, but I felt bad that Jewish kids never got anything. So this year I changed the rules. You can get presents too. I wasn't buying it. That's not true. Jews get presents during Hanukkah and not Christmas. My anger flared, fueled by his persistence. The forced smile vanished completely. His eyes narrowed, and the pleasant charm evaporated into a cold demand for me to open the door. A shiver ran down my spine. "Lara, call 911. I whispered, my voice trembling. He must have heard me, because he turned and bolted, disappearing into the night. We did call the police, but the operator, likely hearing the panicked voices of two small children talking about Santa, didn't take us seriously. She just told us 911 was for emergencies before hanging up. Lara and I were terrified. We only knew our home number and 911. It was the 90s. Dad didn't have a cell phone yet, and I had no idea how to reach him at the hospital. Mom remained unresponsive upstairs. We were completely alone. We huddled together, hoping he wouldn't return. A few minutes later, the insistent knocking resumed. "I know the cops aren't coming." His voice was harsher now. "Let me in, or you'll be in big trouble." Lara burst into tears and scurried upstairs, desperate to rouse our mother. Panic clawed at me. The 7-year-old's mind works in strange ways. I ran to our menorah, grabbed a handful of candles, and lit them, then dashed under the smoke detector. With a quick breath, I blew out all the candles, tossing them towards the alarm. Miraculously, the burst of smoke was enough. The piercing shriek of the smoke alarm filled the house. As an adult, I cringed at the sheer stupidity and danger of that act. But then, all I knew was that the alarm would instantly call 911 and send help. The fire station was less than 2 minutes away. Lara came flying downstairs, her eyes wide with fear at the alarm. I quickly reassured her there was no fire, urging her to stay inside with me. To my utter disbelief, the Santa hadn't left. In fact, he was greeting the firefighters as they arrived. He confidently declared he was our dad, dressed as Santa to surprise us, and claimed his suit had no pockets for keys, leaving him locked out while a fire raged inside. He implored them to break down the door to save us. Astonishingly, the firefighters seemed to believe him. They were preparing to force the door open, telling us to stand back. But Lara and I started screaming. "He's not our dad. Our dad's at the hospital. We don't know who he is." Then, I remembered something crucial. We don't even celebrate Christmas. The firefighter with the ram poised to strike paused. "You don't celebrate Christmas?" he asked, his brow furrowing. "No," I cried, pulling off my kippah to show him, and pointing to our menorah. Tears streamed down my face as I explained how I'd set off the alarm because the police wouldn't believe us, begging him not to let the man in. He believed me. He turned to the imposter. "Why would Santa be at a Jewish home?" I don't remember the man's exact response, but it was clearly unconvincing. 2 firefighters swiftly tackled him to the ground, while another called for police backup. They also asked for the hospital where Dr. Mendel worked. The police arrived, arresting the man. Another officer stayed with us until Dad, looking utterly bewildered and furious, finally arrived. He was livid with Mom for her unconscious state, but overwhelmingly relieved that we were safe. That Christmas Eve was anything but boring. The following year, our quiet, uneventful Hanukkah felt like the greatest gift. To this day, I believe being Jewish saved us. Had we believed in Santa and opened that door, it's terrifying to think what could have happened. It was a chilly December 2022, and my partner, Eleanor, and I were headed for a festive getaway in the Blue Ridge Mountains. We'd snagged what looked like the perfect Airbnb, a charming cabin, all decked out for Christmas, with a killer view and close to a quaint little town. To amp up the holiday cheer, a snowstorm was brewing for that night, so we decided to hit the road a bit earlier. We wanted to get our groceries and settle into the cabin before the heavy snow started. The drive from the city to the Blue Ridge Mountains was about 4 hours. We made good time, stopping only once at a roadside store for some snacks and essentials. From there, it was a straight shot to the Airbnb. We turned onto a winding gravel path, cutting through a clearing in the trees, which led right to the property. The cabin itself was nestled amongst thick woods, boasting a spacious deck with a hot tub, a prospect that became even more appealing with the thought of soaking in it during a snowstorm. The property was adorned with a plethora of Christmas decorations, glowing reindeer, a massive snowman, and giant candy canes lining the path to the front door. We made a few trips from the car to haul everything inside. Our first impression of the place was exactly what we'd hoped for from the pictures. Incredibly cozy. There was a Christmas tree in one corner, stockings hung by the non-existent fireplace, and a scattering of smaller decorations throughout. The cabin had that quintessential woody scent you'd expect from a rustic retreat. It wasn't exactly a log cabin, but then I noticed a stack of logs beside a large fireplace in the living room that explained the aroma. The cabin had 3 bedrooms, though we only needed one. We stashed our luggage in the second bedroom. I did the usual routine, checked the fridge, turned on the TV to see what streaming services were available, and peered out all the windows. There was an upstairs loft with a pool table and a couple of couches, and then there was a basement. Just for the heck of it, I ventured down to the basement. It was quite large relative to the house, but it felt strangely disconnected. It wasn't furnished for lounging and felt more like a utility space, dark, cold, and primarily for laundry or a workshop. Just as I was heading back up, there was a knock at the front door. I hurried to answer it, and there stood a man in his late 40s, dressed in gray sweatpants and a tattered, yellowish-brown jacket. He smiled. "How are you folks doing?" he asked. "Good," I replied, then asked if he was the Airbnb host. He chuckled. "I run the place with my brother." He introduced himself as Gary. Gary mentioned he lived just up the road, next door, and that if Eleanor and I needed anything, we shouldn't hesitate to ask. I thanked him, and he ambled away. It struck me as odd that he knew I was with my girlfriend, as Eleanor hadn't come to the door. Perhaps his brother, Paul, the actual host I had communicated with, had mentioned us wanting a festive trip together. It was pitch black outside, and the snow had started to fall. We cranked up the heat in the cabin and began preparing dinner. Chicken thighs, broccoli, potatoes, and cornbread, a real comfort meal. We ate on the couch, the Christmas tree lights casting a warm, cozy glow as we watched the Polar Express. It was the only decent Christmas movie on any of the streaming platforms. As you can tell, we really love Christmas. After the movie, and once we felt we'd digested enough, we ventured out onto the deck for a hot tub session. I flicked on all the outdoor decorations and Christmas lights, illuminating the front yard. Sitting in the hot tub, watching the snowfall, felt like pure bliss, until the bubbles stopped, and an unnerving silence fell over us. Then we heard them, unmistakable footsteps from somewhere on the property. Eleanor and I exchanged a look. I whispered, "Should I shout who's there?" But she shook her head, urging me to stay quiet. The footsteps receded, growing fainter until they were no longer audible. I tried to reassure Eleanor it was probably just a deer, but deep down, I knew those were human steps. After the hot tub, we went to shower before bed. The hot water in the shower lasted for maybe 2 minutes before turning ice cold. We yelped and jumped out. I immediately messaged Paul, the host. He responded within half an hour, saying, "That's odd," and that he'd send someone to look at the hot water heater tomorrow. We tried to sleep after our abbreviated shower, but in the middle of the night, we were jolted awake by very aggressive bangs on the front door. Eleanor was shaking, terrified. I started to get up, saying I'd check who it was, but she demanded I stay in bed and make no sound. Honestly, I was relieved. I had no desire to know who was at the door in the dead of night. There were probably 3 sets of really loud, angry-sounding bangs before they finally stopped. We sat upright for several minutes in silence, whispering to each other. I eventually got up to lock the bedroom door for added security. Minutes dragged on, but after about half an hour of being wide awake, we eventually drifted back off to sleep. First thing in the morning, I messaged Paul again about the knocks. He replied more quickly this time, sounding just as confused as we were. He basically said, "How strange," adding he had no idea why anyone would be roaming around so late at night. He advised us to alert the authorities if anything like that happened again. Not the most reassuring response. But he was right. What else could he tell us? I didn't want to keep complaining, but these were valid concerns. Outside, a lot of snow had fallen, and the day was dark and cloudy, with flurries still drifting down. I went out to wipe the snow off my SUV, and as I did, I noticed footprints in the snow. They circled around the house. I remembered the knocks from the night before and wondered if they were from the same person. But these footprints looked fresh. It had snowed all night. Surely, last night's prints would have been filled in by now. I then heard footsteps approaching and saw Gary walking from around my car. I told him about the hot water heater problem and that Paul said someone was coming to look at it. He replied he knew and that he was there to take a look himself. I also told him about the knocks at the door last night and showed him the footprints in the snow. He looked at them and said, "There are a lot of strange folk out here that go snooping around at night." I asked if we should avoid using the hot tub at night then, and he dismissed it, saying, "No, that shouldn't be a problem. The people around here are harmless." He went inside the house, walked around for a bit, then descended into the basement, telling me he'd check the water heater. Gary seemed like a really weird guy, honestly. I messaged Paul saying, "Gary's here now, checking out the water heater." Paul replied back, "Is Gary the name of the plumber?" I responded, "No, your brother." Paul's next message sent a chill down my spine. "What do you mean?" He said he's my brother. It started to click in my head. I typed, "Do you have a brother named Gary who runs this Airbnb with you?" Paul's reply was immediate and horrifying. "No. Who is this person?" I rushed to Eleanor, telling her to quietly gather her things. We need to get out of here as quickly as we can. We packed our bags, grabbed all our stuff, and brought it outside to the car in one trip. I'm sure we left behind a charger or something small, but who cared? We got in my car, and as I started it, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw Gary quickly approaching the rear of the SUV. I put it in drive and sped out of there as fast as I could. Once we were back on the main road, we called Paul and explained everything, urging him to call the police immediately. He didn't stay on the line with us for long, but 20 minutes later, he called us back. We were still in the car. He said the police were there now and hadn't seen anyone in the house. Paul was on his way to the cabin as well, but mostly called to get more details from us. We drove around the area, exploring, just to calm our nerves after what had just happened. After a few hours, we started our drive home. Paul messaged me later that night, updating me and apologizing for everything. He said he didn't know anyone who resembled my description of Gary. What still disturbs me is that man was watching us the entire time, from the moment we arrived to when we were in the hot tub, and he was probably the one banging on the front door in the middle of the night. Who knows what his intentions were? It's a good thing we left when we did.